Hello, everyone. Welcome to Todd Talks. Today, I am with Mr. Shawn Merwin. He is an author, adventure writer, and all around extremely creative guy who knows what he's doing. Say hello.
Hello. I'm still dancing from the theme song. I every time I hear it, I'm moving.
Yeah, that's Sam Riegel. He
Good
knocked it out of the
stuff.
park. Yeah,
Oh
we
yeah.
all freaked out when he did it. When he actually he sang it live on Critical Role, and everyone like instant messaged each other at the same time, like, "Okay, we have to make this our theme song."
Yep.
Um,
And it,
yeah.
it works.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, it's one of those lucky things to have happen. So yeah, let's just dive in. Like you have so much knowledge that so many people probably want, right? About adventure writing, about just writing in general. So first
Mhm,
off, you worked on a very recent project. Can you tell us a
mhm.
little bit about that? You just now got permission to talk about it.
Okay, yeah, cool. So I'm one of the guild adepts for the DM's Guild. And for that program, in case you just don't know what it is Wizards, when they went to a slower release cycle, decided to promote a few people to work on projects in tandem with what they were working on in the office. So when the initial content came out, there would be original content that people could go with that would match up what they were working with. So that's what the Guild Adept program was. We've been working on it for a couple of years now, and the newest product that's out from Wizards is the Tactical Maps Reincarnated product. So it's
Right.
a whole bunch of maps from old projects that they put into a pack so people can use. And the Guild Adept said it'd be great if there were adventures to go with them right away. So that's what we've been working on. We've been working on 22 short encounter type adventures that go and match the maps. So some of them would be just a brief 1 hour encounter. Some of them would be long enough where you could probably run like a 4 hour adventure based on what we're putting out. And there are, I believe, 22 maps. So there will be 22 individual adventures to go along with them.
How many of those are you tackling, or are you involved in every all 22?
I am involved in all 22 only because I decided to be the editor for this one. So, so I am working on 3 of them and editing all of them. And like James Introcaso is overseeing the production of this. Rich Lescouflair will do the layout, but probably 7 or 8 of the Guild Adepts all worked on at least one of the adventures.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yep.
So now I know obviously the industry has changed a great deal, but there are a lot of people who are
Mhm.
probably watching at home who want to get into adventure writing or game design.
Mhm.
And what what's your tried and true knowledge that you have accumulated over the time? And I know obviously the industry has changed a great deal, and so a lot of
Mhm.
those paths don't exist anymore.
Sure.
What's some of your best advice for getting into the industry, or at least honing your craft?
The most important thing is to read what you want to write. Um, Back in the third edition days, I got my start in the industry working on an organized play campaign called Living Greyhawk. Wizards created this campaign to, you know, like they're doing now, the Adventures League, making an overall campaign world that you can take your character from different locations and play. And so I was in charge of one region of this Living Greyhawk campaign, and my job was to oversee adventure production. So I would get all sorts of pitches from people saying, I want to write for your region," and I'd say, "Great. What was your favorite adventure that you played or read?" And, "Oh, I've never read or played any of them." Well, obviously, the warning bells are going off. Then, if you're not reading what you want to write, then you shouldn't be writing it.
Right.
So become a student of what you want to write. If you want to write adventures, read adventures. If you want to write classes, read all the classes you can, both the ones that are official Wizards classes and ones that people have created on the DM's Guild, just to see the best that's out there, and then maybe some cool iterations, or maybe the worst that's out there, because you can learn from the worst just as much as you can learn from the best. Cautionary tales are just as strong teachers as the best.
What?
So yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
keep. Go ahead. No, I
Oh
was wondering, like, what adventures get you the most excited? Like, what is there a point when you're writing that you're like, okay, I nailed it? Like, you feel, or do you
no,
feel yourself? Oh, you don't.
I never feel that way. Uh, if I feel that, I usually feel that way. There's usually a curve where it's like I have no idea what I'm doing, and then the curve goes up and up, and then I get to the at some point I'm like, okay, I've got this, and then you're rereading it for the fifth time and making your edits, and you're going, I've seen this way too much and I'm tired of this. So then it's like no one's gonna like this, and it's just your
Uh-huh.
own personal interaction with it. But that's a question that's not just for adventure writing, but it's for any creative process, art, poetry, fiction writing. When am I done? Well, you're done when you don't have anything else to say. So that's my rule for that. Is I usually do it. I always call it the 11th draft. I usually do 11 drafts of something. Sometimes it's just reading it through from the beginning each time after I restart on the next day, or sometimes it's doing a full on edit. But each time you go through it, you are seeing things from a new angle. Here, I'm reading it through as a DM. Now I'm going to read it through as if I were a player interacting with it. What fun things could I do based on this adventure? Then I'm reading it
Mhm.
through as an editor, going, are all my commas in the right place? And each of those passes gives you a new insight into it. And when you can't take it anymore, when you just can't read it one more time, it's done.
When you're just sick of it, when you just kind
Exactly.
of hate it. Yeah. I know that feeling. I think that's how video editing and shooting as well
Sure.
works. When you don't want to be on that location anymore, I'm done.
Mm-mm. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. Are
Yep.
there adventures that get you more, or stories that get you excited, or that you find the most inspiration from?
The stories that get me the most excited are the ones where either I haven't heard them yet, or there's just a twist on something that I haven't envisioned yet. Ravenloft, we were talking about before we started, is just almost the pinnacle of that, right? It's the vampire story. It's the typical vampire story, but there's such a backstory to it. It's such a gothic twist on a D&D adventure that
Hmm.
if you were a fan of D&D back in those days, or even now, you've got your typical dungeon crawl adventure. Here's a twist. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking for, on every level, looking for a twist, whether it's as an overall adventure or if it's just as an encounter, one encounter in an adventure. What makes that encounter cool? What's different than just an orc standing in the room guarding a prisoner, right? What can
Right.
be different about it? And so that's a good way to come at things after you get your feet wet with just trying to write. The a piece of writing advice I got. I was in a creative writing program, and one of my instructors had us pick our favorite short story. Now write it using that structure but different words. So wherever you see a verb, put a verb. Wherever you see an adjective, put an adjective. And just write your own story using that format. And I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. And then I started doing it. And I'm like, this is liberating. It's cool. It teaches you how to put words together well. And you can do the same thing with adventures. It doesn't have to be on a word for word basis, but take your favorite adventure, use the same format, use the same structure, just plug in different themes or different monsters or different motives and see how it goes. And that will then teach you form. And once you know the form, then you can step back and make it your own. It was a Thelonious Monk who said, learn everything you can, then forget all that bleep and just play.
Yeah.
That's it. Learn everything you can, then forget it all and do your thing.
Yeah, that's one of the. I mean, even not just from a story perspective on Ravenloft, but they even just encounters with regular monsters were changed. The fact that
Right.
the zombies, their limbs could be severed and would continue to attack you.
Hmm.
I think you need that kind of push because you've been so used to fighting skeletons and zombies, and to have them
Yeah.
do something unexpected uh, was so scary the first time.
Right.
If you're being run through that, or even reading
Right.
as a DM, is like, oh, this is fantastic. I do that now with
Yeah.
like goblins
Hmm.
in my homebrew are infectious. So everyone
Oh.
who's a goblin, it wasn't always a goblin. So it's more of like this Prometheus kind of, if you've seen that film, if you're one of five people that have seen Prometheus.
Oh,
No, so hurtful.
you were the
I
guy.
actually, yeah, I saw it all 5 times. But yeah, I like the idea of this like infectious disease that turns someone into a goblin. So
Mhm.
playing goblins is more fey. Yeah.
Right. And that's one cool thing, even if you're not writing for publication, even if you're just a DM and you want to surprise your players, just take a monster with the same challenge rating as the monster you need. So just use goblins. Just use that other monster, but just reskin it as a goblin. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden it's shooting a tentacle out. And you can just change that to it's holding a whip, right? So it's makes sense within the game, but it's doing different things mechanically than a goblin would normally do.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
That's actually fantastic advice. That yeah, I mean, God, you could do that to anything. You can just grab any monster block and just
Yep.
yeah, you
Just
give
yeah.
them different powers or find the equipment reasons for the why they're doing that. That's brilliant.
Mm.
I don't know why I didn't think about that. That's a good, especially if you're not prepared as a DM. Just
Yeah.
grab a random
Oh,
monster with the right CR rating. Yeah,
yep. Yep. No, it's almost like I've been doing this for 20 years or something.
I know it's weird. It's
It's
like
true.
you've been doing this for yeah you. It's weird. It's
A
almost like
long time.
you have experience. It's strange.
Yeah.
Um, what now have you done? Do you do design as well, like on classes and subclasses?
Not as much.
Okay.
I did it a bit with fourth edition. Uh, in some of the Dungeon and Dragon magazine, online magazine articles. I worked on that. And I've done some work on it, but most of the work that I've been doing is on adventure design, because especially Wizards wanting to slow down the production of the crunchy stuff, um, makes it harder to put that out. But plus, they want to play test that stuff a ton. Right? They have
Mhm.
the Unearthed Arcana articles that they put out, and there's a reason we haven't seen the Artificer out yet, because they want to make sure they get it right. There's a reason that psionics aren't out yet. They really want to get that right. And so as a designer, I don't want to look at them who play test everything and I'm just like, I just scratched this new class down, here you go. It takes a lot more play testing, a lot more brain work to put, a lot more hubris to put that out.
Psionics, yeah, no, I completely agree. The psionics, I don't know if they've ever been balanced. I still have my Psionicist second edition handbook,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
they always had a power for
Yep.
everything. They're like
Oh
the
yeah, it
jack of
was.
all trades.
Yep. I remember, first edition, rolling on those percentile dice on a 100. You are a psionic. It's amazing how many players rolled just exactly
Yeah,
what they needed.
that's right. That's
Boy,
right.
that's a
You had to get that 100. Oh my,
yeah.
when
How did
Elf was like,
everybody in the party get to be a psionicist? I have no
yeah,
idea how that happened.
it was always weird when everyone got 3 18s.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you're like a kid and you start playing D&D and your players like come up to you like, I just rolled 3 18s. I don't know.
Yeah, I had a
Stuff
guy show
happened.
up I had a table. We were kids. He showed up. He was in a different group, but he wanted to play with ours. And he said, "Can I bring my character?" Sure, yeah, bring it. All 18s for his stats. And we were a little crazy, but we weren't like that. And I said, he's like, "Well, I just sat and I rolled. I kept rolling until I rolled all 18s." And I'm thinking, yes, theoretically, a physicist could argue that if 10,000 monkeys all rolled dice, they would in fact at some point roll all 18. So, yeah, that.
I even then highly unlikely. And also
Yes, exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, those were the good
Uh,
old days.
yeah. Yeah. I'm a point buy or
Hmm.
standard array kind of person at this point. So
Yeah, well,
that's how you
yep, yep.
do you get to play a lot?
Not really. Not really. I have a home game we play about every other week, and I am DMing right now. We switch off. I
Mhm.
went to Winter Fantasy, a convention a few weeks ago, and I just played basically the entire convention just to get back into that groove of being on the receiving end of a story and b a beating, which is always good. And but had a great time, and the next time we switch DMs, I'll get the chance to play again, so that'll be good.
That's fantastic. What did you how have things changed? I know this is a big nebulous question, but you
Ooh.
have seen the industry change so dramatically over time. What stands out to you the most?
When I was growing up, all I wanted to do was be a game designer, especially D&D, because I'm 12 or whatever, and I don't want to live a real life. I want to live a D&D life. So here we go. And there was really no way to, even if I was good back then, no way to get your stuff published, right? There was TSR, and there
Right.
was Dragon Magazine, and there was Dungeon Magazine, and that was about it. There were a few other smaller places, but if you wanted to do D&D, that was it. And more people, I think, won Olympic medals than were game designers back in those days.
Oh wow, that's a good point.
You know,
Yeah.
it was very hard to do. And so even with second edition, a few more options, but still no. Then third edition came out and the open gaming license, and boom, everything exploded. Um, and now with I was going to say D&D Beyond, which is awesome, but the DM's Guild, you can put your stuff up. Not only can you put your stuff up, but you can put Ravenloft, Forgotten Realms, Eberron. I'm sure I'm missing some, but never in my life did I think that they would open up that amount of IP and make it accessible to people. And they did. Now anyone, literally anyone, as long as you're willing to sign up on the site, can put your goods out there and see where it lands you. And I never would have imagined that happening. And since streaming became a hit, the audience has grown too. I would have never quit my day job 5 years ago and said, okay, I think I'm going to try to be a full-time game designer. And I was able to do that last year because I'm not going to, become a millionaire. I'm not going to buy any private islands
Yeah.
anytime soon. But I at least have a chance now to feed a small family with game design work. So it's the opportunities are endless now. There are so many avenues you could go: blogging, streaming, writing, art, that layout, project management. And any of those things are now much more viable options than they were even 5 years ago.
Do you have any thoughts on why it has exploded in popularity? Not only because of live streams or,
Mhm.
even being mentioned on Netflix with D&D. Do you think maybe it also has to do with people wanting to connect or disconnect?
Yes. Yeah, I think we've hit a point now where people who want to tell a story together um, don't have as many avenues as they used to, just in terms of the social aspect of it, because we are so disconnected as a society. Even though we are connected via computers, via social media, via all those things, um, the getting together down at the pub and sitting and chatting doesn't happen anymore. I spent, a good part of my young life sitting in a bar stool
Yeah.
doing my homework, while people were at the bowling alley or doing this or doing that, and everyone was just talking. And
Yeah.
there's less of that now in regular life. So D&D is a way to more formally, but still in a creative way, come together and socialize. So I think everything happened at just the right time, for the new edition of D&D. Uh, it being a great addition, but B, just the want for that sort of socialization came at just the right
Hmm.
time.
Yeah, I completely agree. We actually have a question from chat from Alpha Stream One. Shawn, what are some of your favorite products that you have designed? And after so many, how do you keep being inspired to come up with new ideas?
Uh, it's the ideas, I think, are always there, and they're always there in everyone. I don't think I think some people are more creative than others, but that creativity is fostered, rather than innate. I think we're all creative. I think as if you put any child in a room with other children and say play, they will play. they will all be creative in different ways. But getting that creativity into the specific form that we're trying to work with, whether it's painting or sculpture or music or whatever, that takes time and it takes effort. And so I don't think I am more creative than the next person. I think I have worked long enough in a form that allows me to channel it uh, in the best way possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay,
But do you
cool.
have? But which of your products do you like the most? How like
Which
which one?
of my products?
Yeah.
The one that I'm most in love with right now is one that I can mention but can't talk about. And
Okay.
that's I can mention that I worked with Teo Sabadia and a bunch of other people on the Acquisitions Incorporated book,
Correct.
but I
But
can't
you
talk.
can't
I
talk
can't.
about it.
I can't talk about what's in it. But just the fact that it was a brand new space to play in,
Yeah.
uh, it it allowed me and allows other people who worked in there to really be playful, right? So often it's you have to compress everything down into a very distilled form that's right. You know, it has to be in this format. It has to say these things. With the Acquisitions Incorporated book, it's a big goofy playground,
Right.
but it's also very dark
Yeah.
in a way, uh,
Yes.
which is right up my alley because I worked in the business world for a long time. So I had a lot of things to say about, you know, business
Yeah.
related stuff, but it's also goofy and funny and so that was I would be writing and I would just start laughing out loud at what I was writing because it was so ridiculous and so fun. And that's something that doesn't always happen when you're working on a Ravenloft book per se, where you're, you know, everything is dark and edgy and you're looking for the drama in
Yeah.
that. So that's been my favorite thing that I've worked on in the last, you know, year or so.
Bringing corporate greed to D&D was definitely a niche that needed to be filled.
Oh, it did.
So
It did. And you know, I think it was always there, you know, even regular random home groups when you're playing and you get to like the dividing up of things or you get to talk about a
yeah.
guild here and there. You know, it was the jokes were always there,
Yeah.
but until
But
Acquisitions Incorporated came along.
yeah, they became manifest. Uh
Right.
I have a character who his backstory is he literally makes like he's always hustling. So he
Mhm.
has like bags of holding, but when the people die, the bags of holding return to the shop.
Oh
So
yeah.
so like
Yep.
they always get sent out on adventures. They know they're probably gonna die
Yep.
back. So you're always getting like new magical items and gold coming back to
Nice.
you.
Yep.
So it's like that whole with the gold rush, right? Like the people
Yep.
who made money off the gold rush were not the miners.
No,
They were
no,
the
they were
people
the
who were
peoples. Yep.
people
You got it.
hustling, giving you like so basically giving you a bag of holding is like giving you a pan. Only the pan comes back when you die.
Mhm.
Seemed like a
Nice.
pretty good D&D hustle. You never have to
I
adventure,
love
just
that.
stay at home. Yeah.
See, now you just giving me an idea. So the next adventure I want to write is going to be exactly that. It's going to be set in like a gold rush setting. And so
Yeah.
that's, you know, that's I didn't think of that. You thought of that. And now I'm going to steal that and I'm going to
Yeah.
use it.
That's the creative
Yeah.
process though. Like when you get to talk to other people and bounce ideas back and forth, that's I've never had a better or a healthier creative experience than that. Like a
Mhm.
room full of people, whether it's 2 or 5 or 10, just throwing ideas out there and then being inspired because it's just like having a faster CPU.
Yeah.
Like you can't
Exactly.
think of everything yourself,
Yep.
nor would I want to. And that's why I don't
Mhm.
understand sometimes like when some creatives get too egotistical about or too
Yeah.
precious about story that they're working on, who are working
Mhm.
with other people, is you can't be that way because you're gonna make a
Right.
better story if you work with people.
Yep.
That's my
And
opinion.
you just said two different things that could be tips for people who want to get into writing. One is don't create alone.
Right.
We just proved why right there, right?
Right.
Because someone else is going to have the right word or the right idea or the right mechanic to go with what you're creating. Uh, so, you know, talk with people, have a little game club like a book club, but with games, and just sit and talk about them. So don't create alone. And the other thing is, you said the word precious, and one of the biggest lessons I got from a writing teacher of mine was your words are not precious, right?
Yeah.
You they can be torn up, thrown away, and they can be done again. Your time might be precious. The thoughts might be precious to you, but those words on the page, they're nothing. They can be redone, remade, and so don't get too attached to them.
Right. Yeah, it's an important lesson because it's hard
Mhm.
at first. You become very emotionally invested, as you do
Yep.
with anything creative,
Sure.
but that can often be to your own detriment,
Hmm.
both if something bad happens
Yeah.
or if something good happens.
True.
Like, you could be
Yeah.
robbing yourself of a positive experience,
True.
if you are too precious about something. So we have another
Hmm.
question from Zool, with about 18 use, uh, in chat. Please elaborate on what a guild adept is and how to become one.
Okay.
It's a good question.
So uh, the Guild Adept program is was started by Chris Lindsay, to the best of my knowledge. At least he is our main contact. And so they're basically just looking for new voices who can do good work, generally on a tight schedule. And the best way to become one is to put stuff up on the DM's Guild, and particularly put things up not free or not pay what you want. Because part of what they're looking for is not only can you put two words together and start a fire, but
Hmm.
can you sell your idea? And so if you are put something up, and it's getting good attention, then they are going to head in your direction. Now that doesn't mean that they're not going to get guild adepts in other ways, but that is one way to do it. Um,
Right.
uh, Personally, I also work with a company called Bold Man Games, who create content for the Adventurers League. So I am in charge of curating, creating, editing some content. Same thing. I would do the exact same thing. I'm going to go on the DMs Guild, or if you're interested, you're going to send me an email. Say, I'm interested. I'm going to say, give me a link to your product on the DMs Guild. I will look at it there. Then I will see what you've done. Doesn't have to have lots of art. Doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to be able to convey to me that you have cool ideas and that you know how to write. And so that's what a guild adept is, I guess. And
Hmm.
that's the easiest path that I have heard is put stuff up on the guild, make yourself known, write a blog, uh, show you have good ideas that you can keep on a schedule. All of those things are very valuable as a creator.
What is the most punishing adventure you've ever written?
Whew, the most punishing. Um, I would say that there was the very first Adventures League adventure that was put out for fifth edition was called Defiance and Flan,
Hmm.
and it was they came to me and said, "We want you to write this. It needs to be 5 short adventures that are playable in exactly 1 hour." Because they're gonna do these at conventions, and they're gonna
Hmm.
have people standing in line, and when the hour's up, we're gonna set a new table and move the other people out. So it can't be an hour and 2 minutes, and it can't be 40 minutes because then people will feel like they didn't get the full experience. So it needs to be done in an hour. And oh, by the way, it also needs to teach people how to play fifth edition. And oh, by the way, and oh, by the way, oh, by the way. And
Right.
so that was probably the most play testing and the most design I've ever done for an adventure, because I was it was the first adventure, for the Adventurers League period. So if it was terrible, people would say the Adventurers League is horrible, and I would be,
Yeah. That's
solely
a lot of
responsible.
pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would play test with a stopwatch and, say, okay, you ready, go. And I would run it. And then when we were done, I would click stop and try to make sure there was about 57 minutes so there could be room for people to get up, move.
Yeah.
And then, and so I wrote a lot about designing that adventure on a blog. It's at It's called Mastering Dungeons, and it's at encodeddesigns.com. Mastering Dungeons is my blog, and I wrote all about each of the 5. Now that it's like 3 or 4 years past, what I liked about it, what I think I could have done better. I really take an in-depth look at the design just to pick it over and see what I've learned since I wrote it.
That's fantastic. I am very curious and always impressed by any adventure that can last only 1 hour. And like with editing video, it's not hard to make a long video. It's hard to make a short video.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not hard to make a short, a long film. It's so much harder to make a short film and to kill things also that you love that need to be just like, there's only so much that can fit on the page sometimes, not digitally, but also, it's the hardest thing. I often think about running on Twitch like 1 hour adventures. And like, can I do that? Like, is there an audience for like a 1 hour adventure? But that's basically like, go kill those goblins. That's like, it's you don't have a lot of time.
Right. And that was the trick, because Mike Merles, when D&D Beyond, and even before that, during 4th edition days, he said, I want to be able to make a game where we can run on 1 hour adventure and be happy, be satisfied at, beginning, a middle, and end. We did everything that we want to do. The story is told and we're done. And, even back then people were like, well, if that's what 5th edition is going to be, I don't want it, but it's a challenge, and it was a neat challenge, to say, okay, this hour adventure, we're going to do more role playing, but still have like a puzzly sort of thing. Now this adventure is going to be straight combat, and it's low level, so we could probably get 2 in, and all of that finagling of time and story and structure. It was, I think it works. If my evidence of me running it and then people telling me about it when they've run it, I think it works. Now, some people have said, well, I'm a very vocal DM, so it took me an hour and a half. That's fine. If you're not running it at a convention where everything is on the hour has to go, then you're good. So I hope it works, because then I had to write 4 more of them after that. At the beginning of each of the Adventures League seasons, I had to write another one and then another one. So they kept asking me to write them. So after the 5th one, I figured I must be doing this semi-right.
You might have done something right, something there. Yeah. If you, a question from Angelia 1902001. The question is, if you could remake a classic adventure, which one would you want to remake and why? Or if you had to.
If I had to, gun to my head, no. If I had to, I would do Pharaoh, which is an old 1st edition adventure that is set in a desert. And it is very it was one of those ones that was really different, like Ravenloft for me, because there was a big story behind it. It wasn't just there's this mad thing in this dungeon and that's it. There was a serious story behind it, having to do with this pharaoh who let his people down, basically, and so now the land is cursed. And it was drawn out into a larger set called Desert of Desolation. But that was one of the original adventures that I ran as a DM way back in the day. So I have a fondness for it, and I think it could be a really great 5th edition adventure, just updated or rewritten, with a sort of different story.
Sorry, yep, that's the one. Yeah, I had that. Yep, I remember that. Sorry. I just had to see the cover. The cover art immediately like erupted into my mind because of like all of the modules. It was like the most like a heavy metal album cover. Let's see. We have a couple more questions from the audience. From Alpha Stream number 1. When you have lots of projects, how do you decide how to switch between them to keep each one moving forward? That is a difficult question.
It is a difficult question, and it's a difficult thing to do. I try to, when I take on new projects, take on a different role in each one. So on one, maybe I'm doing the writing. Maybe on another, I'm just doing the editing. And on another, maybe I'm just doing design. So I can go and I can just start writing. And if I run into if I slow down while I'm writing, then I'll go over and I will work on the editing for this one. And I also try to take on different types of projects. So I'm working on something now that is it's a lot of words that need to come out. So I will start my day with that. Keep going until I hit a point where I need a break. Then I will switch over to a short adventure or write a blog post. Or I have a podcast called Down with D&D that comes out weekly. And so I will do the notes for that. And when I'm done with that, it takes an hour maybe. Then I will go back and see if I am ready to delve into the long project again. So it's just constantly doing things. And now that I'm doing it full time, there's also the business side of things I need to deal with. So I'll
Yeah.
go and look at, do I need to invoice anything? Are there any art orders I need to create? Is it's just keeping busy until your mind is in a place where you can work on whatever is supposed to be next.
Right. Another question was, do you think it's a decent fiction writing advice to start with 1,000 words, then 5,000, then 25,000 when it comes to, say, writing D&D adventures? That would it be effective to be writing short 1 or 2 hour adventures at first, and then expand to 4 to 5 hour?
Yes, most definitely. Yes. It's almost, people, I've talked to novelists and I've talked to short story writers, and the consensus is short story writing is much harder.
Right.
Because exactly what we talked about earlier, right? It's easy to write. It's easy to make a full length movie. It's harder to make a short. Um,
Yeah,
I
like
don't.
just reading. I just finished some books, a book by Neil Gaiman, and
Oh yeah.
the short stories in there are sort of like very concise
Hmm.
and no room, no room.
Right.
So you have to
Yeah.
get like a very fine point done in a
Yep.
short amount of time.
Yeah, I would say that, in terms of writing adventures, I would say that it is easier to start with a shorter adventure. Um, 1 or 2 encounters. What's the hook? What happens? What is the consequence? And then what's the ending? And just start with that. If you then see what should come next, then you can add the next encounter onto that and just go from there. And maybe you get to a point where you're like, okay, that's the story. It's only going to be an hour long adventure, but that's okay. I worked on a Cobalt Press product called Creature Codex Layers, where I just took some of the monsters, took maps that they had created at Cobalt Press, and made an adventure from them. Some of them are, kind of long. Some of them are very, very short, and that's okay as long as there is a feeling of accomplishment at the end. Then you're good. And there's always the next adventure, whether it's this in the same storyline or if the characters move off in a new direction. That's D&D, right? Not
Mhm.
everyone is going to play the level 1 through 20 adventure with all the same story. Sometimes you're going to be grabbing things from other places and playing, and that's okay too. The DMs are pretty good at using things to fit their own purposes. So even if you write something that is supposed to be one sort of story, if it's well done, if the encounters are good, the DM will take that, use those encounters, tweak the story as he or she needs to, and you'll be all set.
Yeah, yeah. I find a lot of like I always run games in my own homebrew setting, but I that does not mean I do not buy every single D&D adventure and book, because the amount of inspiration I get from that, that's that kind of moment where you're like, that's kind of why you become a dungeon master too sometimes, is if you're a player and then dungeon master does something, you're like, oh, but I would do this thing, or either I would do that thing. And that it
Mhm.
serves as like a point of inspiration. We have another
Yeah.
question that is from a common escape. Interesting gamer. Interesting username. What magic item have you had the most fun with in a campaign?
Wands of Wonder are always,
Yeah.
I mean, fun. It depends on what you mean by fun. If you're a DM, they're a joy. If you're a player, especially the player that's not wielding it, it can be a disaster. Wells of Many Worlds are great, uh, because then you are opening up your campaign to many worlds, many planes. Trying to think of what else. It's been so many over the years. Rod of Seven Parts. There are so many great Rod of Seven Parts campaigns.
Hmm.
Just because you gotta, it's the perfect fetch quest made writ large. Uh, so I always love that item.
I uh I homebrewed. I have a Norse mythology D&D setting, and I homebrewed a was essentially like the kind of bracelets the Norse would wear, like an Ouroboros shaped bracelet. And when you threw it, you had to say where you wanted to go, but you could only speak in generalities. And so it was very hard to get to go where you actually wanted to go. It was not a very effective magical item. And the best thing that happened in that game was in one adventure, someone didn't make it that day. And so they said, I want to go to a safe place. And so they went to the actual vault of Surtur, who is the king of fire giants
Yep,
and,
that's safe.
and must fly. And so very safe place, very
Mhm.
literal. And then they had to try to escape that realm and being in the safe in the first place, and like tons of fire demons and giants and all this stuff. So the next adventure, all these things happen. This other player is back and they have the bracelet and things are going very bad, and she immediately throws it and says, I want to go to a safe place, and all the entire group just went, no.
No,
And they
why?
ended up back right where they were the last adventure.
That's
So
great.
that's my personal favorite for for personal reasons. But
Yeah.
I like a magical item that causes more trouble than it's worth.
That's
So
if I run just a strictly homebrew campaign, there is no magic item that I give that does not have some sort of drawback or
yeah,
some sort of chaotic thing. Because for me, that's well, I've been playing since the very, very, very early '80s, let's say,
yeah,
if not the late '70s, and so I've played enough campaigns that I know magic items can ruin a campaign faster than anything. And so
absolutely.
I tend to give magic less frequently, especially with fifth edition, because you really don't need it. And when I do, the players who know me are like, I don't want to touch it. But oh, it's a glowing sword. No, I'm not going to touch it. And it's not that if they touch it, they blow up or anything. But it has its benefits. But magic is a thing that very few people can control, in just about any fantasy world worth its salt. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with it. That's
Yeah,
my that's my gig.
yeah, and plus you can always throw sentience into that. So nothing like
Hmm.
a sentient magical item to cause problems in your day.
Oh
I roleplayed
yes,
as a sentient magical item. Uh, because why not?
exactly. They
uh,
they can become just as much a character in a story as anybody else.
what is well? I mean, speaking to that point, what is the craziest magical item you've created yourself?
Oh boy, it's been
Has it been a while?
yeah. I back back in first and second edition, they had the alignment swords.
Oh, I
Do you
forgot
remember what
about
I'm
those.
talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so I did a whole series of other items based on that.
right,
And if you found them all, they came together to form this huge artifact. But they were
right.
super wacky. And I don't even remember exactly what they did. But, the lawful good one was basically the stereotypical lawful good. Yeah, I think it was a shield and so as they were collecting these things, these basically became NPCs
Right.
that were arguing with each other and would take over people and get into fights, and it was pretty wacky, but it was
That's a
good
great
fun.
that's a great adventure right there.
Yeah,
Adventure where everyone plays a sentient magical item that has taken over a
yeah,
player. Yeah.
exactly. Yes, that would be great. Yep.
Yeah.
Again, I'm writing this down now. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We actually we should like let's come up with a subclass for sword and
Yeah.
shield and helmet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like we can do this. We can knock this out in about
Sure.
15 minutes.
15
Yeah.
minutes, no problem.
Boots. I don't know who's Boots.
Yeah,
I don't know what. I
Boots.
don't know who. Maybe a barbarian is Boots. Rogue. Rogue is Boots. Yeah, Boots.
Yeah,
Yeah, possibly.
cloak. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just another terrible idea from me. Question: how do you draw the line for information given to a DM in an Adventures League module versus what you expect the DM to add in terms of flavor? This is an excellent question because sometimes you have to leave room for the DM. But
Yep.
I will let you
It's
answer this.
It is in fact an excellent question, and the question really harkens to a larger question, which is, if you're running an organized play campaign, how much guidance do you give the DM? Because the player may be moving to a new DM the next day, the next
Mm-hmm.
week, the next slot at a convention. So if you want that experience to be a little more uniform, how much guidance do you give the DM versus letting the DM be what we consider a DM, which anything goes? And the question is, or the answer is, that has changed over the years. With third edition, they had the Living Greyhawk campaign, and fourth edition, we had the Living Forgotten Realms campaign, and it was, we want the experience to be as close as possible from one DM to the next. So there were pages of DM instructions and very specific instructions on how to run certain things. And in for some events, it was like tactics down to the round. And this round do this, and this round do this, which some people like. Some people were like, it's not my thing, and that's okay. With living, it's not living anymore. With Adventures League, we're getting now more of let the DM do their thing rather than tell them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
In the latest season, is no box text, which is, it's different for DMs who are used to the living campaign organized play sort of motif, because
Mm-hmm.
you may get the adventure 20 minutes before you're going to run it. You don't have time to go through and make notes and make things your own. So that box text is a great tool. On the other hand, if it's not there, it opens up the DM to A, be able to, or B, have to make it their own. And generally, if a DM is given that opportunity, they can really shine and really tailor it toward the players. So when I started, it was give the DM as much information as you can without having them fall asleep while they're reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like this move toward having the DM make it more their own. Um, and it's always that pendulum. It's always that balance between what's too much information, what's not enough, what's just right. And in a perfect world, the DM will absorb it all and be able to give the players exactly the experience they want. We don't live in a perfect world, so there's never the right answer, because some DMs need that. They need that box text. They need those instructions. They're not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable without them. And you don't want to leave them out, but you also don't want to spend, 10,000 extra words that you don't need for the DM that's going to just read the synopsis and run whatever they want anyway.
Right.
So, it's always a pendulum, and we will continue, at least my work for the Adventures League will continue to try to give as much as possible without taking away the DM's prerogative to be a DM.
Right. Good answer. We have another question from Druid Druidich Amish. I'm not quite sure. 30 years as a dungeon master myself. How do you keep from burnout DMing? Good players. And that's my answer to that, really. Having and embracing players being able to control the storyline has always helped me. You have bad sessions, you can't help that, and sometimes that is a function of that can burn you out. Um,
Yep.
that's it's not like a great answer, but like having great players, there's nothing better as a DM when you can sit back and watch them argue about something and role play
Mhm.
about something, and them just kind of like because you do. You find these beautiful moments where for like 20 minutes you have nothing to do
Yep.
because they're doing it all for you, and that's when you succeed. That prevents burnout.
Mhm.
Having
Yeah.
having everyone having equal share. That's my answer.
Yep. And that is also a great question. And I ran for the same group, when I was in high school. Then in college, I had a group and I ran for the same group.
Mhm.
Then I took a break, got married, had kid, but then I got back in with third edition. And as I started doing more writing, I started going to conventions and running games for strangers for 4 hours. And each table taught me something new. Each
Mhm.
table was special in their own way. Some of them just goofy and hilarious. Some of them super serious, great role playing. Some of them super tactical and teaching me lessons about game design that I would have never learned unless I had people, doing 7,000 points in a round.
Yeah.
So, DMing for in public for strangers teaches you a lot. It keeps it fresh, and then you can go back to your home group and have fun with them, but b now you have a context for is how is my group different than these other groups? Maybe I could DM a little bit differently to give them a little bit more of what they want based on my experiences there. So that is what kept it fresh for me.
That has to be invaluable because yeah, you as a dungeon master, you often you're just playing for your friends, and
Mhm.
you to be able to go to a convention and play for so many different people, that learning the amount you must learn at a convention must be just astronomical. I expect.
Yeah, at one Gen Con, I ran 7 different slots, so 7 games, 4 hours each, of the same adventure that I had written, for Living Forgotten Realms, and I ran it differently every single time. The story was different almost every single time based on what the players chose to do and how they tag. Some of them didn't even get near the end because they went off in this other direction, and I was just like, well, here we go, let's see what happens. And so yeah, just even doing that one Gen Con taught me more than I think 10 years of reading how-to books. It's just, you're thrown into the fire. So if you choose to, Bald Man Games runs Gen Con, D&D at Gen Con and Origins and Winter Fantasy, and maybe even a few other conventions coming up. So volunteer, even if it's just for one slot or 4 slots. Not only can you like get your badge for free at some shows or a hotel room for free if you DM enough, it's a great experience. And I would not be the writer that I am if I had not done that for a few years, as I was learning.
Hmm. How do you? That's a very good answer. How do you work to best represent established properties? So you don't work out for Star Trek and Acquisitions Incorporated. Like how do you play in someone else's sandbox?
Very, very carefully.
Yeah.
Uh, no, I mean, what you do is you talk to the people who have hired you, and you say, "What are my parameters?" Hopefully, they will get those across, and then you just go. Um, there's a word that gets used a lot in our industry. It's called canon, right?
Yes.
Canon, and there have been wars won and
Yeah.
lost, fought because I mean, it goes back. It's a religious term, right? Canon, as
Right.
in which stories, which parts of the Bible are we going to include, and which part are we going to leave out, right? So
Which is
that's
the reason canon even came about, is because in TV shows there was the story Bible that would
right.
you would write first ahead of time to give like have an established have character backgrounds, all this stuff, so like you knew the parameters that you could write for TV in.
Yep.
And so that, I think that's where that came from partially.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So we're talking biblical proportions, whether it be story Bible or the actual Bible, and
Right.
and so that term has now come down to mean what is actual, what is the trueness of this setting. And my advice and the thing I try to do is respect the canon, but don't be a slave to it.
Hmm.
Because if all you're worried about is it true to what has come before, then you're not telling a new story. You're just retelling the old story. Yet there is a lot of value in that historical knowledge. There are people love it because there are themes. People love it because there are beloved characters. So respect that. Respect that. Use that when it fits what you are trying to do. But canon also turns into sort of a gatekeepery sort of thing where, if people don't know the canon, then they get looked down upon by people who have loved it forever, and it closes off new avenues of storytelling and new fans if you just are beholden to that canon. So that's what I do with Star Trek. It's what I do with D&D. I've written in the Forgotten Realms. I've written in Ravenloft. I've written in Dark Sun and Eberron, and I don't think I've written in Planescape, but maybe someday. And in all of those things, it's do your due diligence, but also tell the story that they ask you to tell. If they ask you to do something, they've asked you to do it for a reason because you are good at something. So respect that they've come to you and do what you think is right. In some cases, it's going to have to, like with Star Trek, it has to go to actual CBS and they have to review it.
Yeah.
That because that is a valuable property for them. I'm sure with the realms, with Forgotten Realms, that there is some due diligence done on that end to make sure things are, looking good in terms of that. But tell the story. Tell the story you want to tell, and respect what's come before. That's the quick and easy answer that I just spent 5 minutes giving.
And this is a terrible question to ask you, but do you have a favorite D&D setting?
I grew up with Greyhawk, so that's the one that I always come back to. But each of the settings is great in its own way. It has something that makes you want to tell a story there. So I love working in all the different settings, and it's why I loved working right with Acquisitions Incorporated, because it was just that one more difference between that and your typical fantasy story. So I'm
Mhm.
always looking for, going back to canon, what makes this different? What's the theme? What stories fit into that setting, and how can I tell that story with my own twist?
I have a very silly question. Do you have a favorite player? Do you have a favorite character that you've made that you've held on to over the years?
Oh yeah, yeah. My favorite character is called Brillo. Um, he's a gnome. He's changed over the editions, but now he's a bard, and he's basically. Well, I grew up in a very rural area, and so this is my homage to all the people I grew up with, because he plays the banjo and the washboard. Uh, he doesn't enunciate well. Let's put it that way. His diction is poor, but he is a rip. I love to play stupid characters because then I don't have to pay attention and I can just do the craziest things. So that's my favorite, is Brillo the Bard.
Playing dumb characters is such it's so fun.
Yeah.
It's so much freedom in being stupid and literal.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
I have a oh go ahead.
I was gonna say, are you an instigator type of player where you just like to push buttons and see what happens?
Well, oddly enough, no.
Okay.
Okay. So my main character is Avron, who is essentially D&D's Loki. He is constantly causing trouble. He just likes getting. He likes a trick. He likes being able to fool people. That's all he lives for.
Okay.
To such a degree that he will fool himself. Like he's definitely a problem character, but
Nice.
not always being disruptive. Now I played
Okay.
another character named Rend, who is just like a war for. He's just a construct, actually, a magical group of magical items that suddenly just became sentient, and he's
Mm,
so literal. You have to be careful what he says. So like, and
right.
I created him as a companion to my wife's character when I run her on solo adventures. So what he would do is she would be like, all right, Rend, if any of the you can't make any noise. If any of the goblins hear us, you have to kill them. And he's like, okay. But he's super polite. So they'd like
Right.
sneak around. He'd see a goblin and he'd be like, hello. Oh no.
Oh,
I have to kill you now.
Right.
And
That's
then
great.
that, yeah, so that kind of nightmare would ensue.
Yeah.
A big fan of one-on-one adventures, actually. But our time is out though. Is one speaking of one is now 1 p.m. Pacific time. So thank you so much, Shawn Merwin. We have to have you back. You have so much great knowledge. It is such a great time talking to you about everything. I really
It's such
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching. Have a great day.